And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Life from the Inside Out with Kris. And I'm your host, Dan, and I'm here with Serge. And yeah, we just had a great episode talking about our fear response. And Kris really gave some practical advice in that episode about how to sit with that and truly to get to the source of it. And if you didn't watch that, head on back to that episode. It's a really good one. But yeah, we got a little bit into towards the end of that about some of the role of the imagination in that cycle and response. So I think maybe we'll build on that. We'll see. But yeah, welcome back, and I'm glad that you're here with us. So we'll get into the deep trance channeling here in just a moment. So. How you doing, Serge?
I'm good. I'm good. I
Mm.
noticed that my cam is not so focused.
Oh, and now you are.
Yeah. Huh. I guess I noticed it and it
That is
complied.
that is a fine use of the imagination just there.
Well, we trust that you are comfortable and we thank you for your consideration.
Oh, thanks as well, Kris. Welcome back.
The imagination is so important that sometimes you take it so much for granted that it completely escapes you as to its importance in your everyday life because it is always front and center. So you seem to miss it. For instance, children play with the imagination quite a bit. It occupies the major portion of their waking hours because they're using it to discover the physical representation of the world around them. When they learn to walk, for instance, they put into practice how they might be able to move those lower limbs, the legs, to help them navigate through one room and another. So it is an important process. And eventually, even any fear or hesitation about walking or standing upright, as opposed to on all fours, and standing upright, and then strengthening those little leg muscles in such a fashion that all of a sudden they might go from being able to stand up to running full blast from one room to another, getting into all the closets and the cupboards, under the sink, and so on and so forth. The imagination has a great role to play in that. Look at children play in the park, play in the sandbox. They are making imaginary castles with sand. They are drawing imaginary princes and princesses, imaginary drawings of castles and knights in armor, or perhaps Autobots. But all the same, the imagination plays a great role in everyday life events. None of your artists, whether a painter, a sculptor, or anything else, would be without the use of the imagination. Because they utilize the imagination to bring into focus what they sense or feel in one form or another as a potential work of art, and how they will put it together and make it happen. Whether it is painting, sculpting, whatever the case may be, the imagination plays a huge role. So does the imagination have an important role for a musician, for a chef, mechanic, whatever you have, whatever functional capacity that you have as your occupation or role in human society, the use of the imagination is important. Without that, you would literally be brought to your knees. You would not be able to function or, quote unquote, imagine how to be, period. So your identity, your sense of personality in that respect is born from how you imagine yourself to be who you think you are. It is that important a deal. Actors, actresses, whether it is on stage or on Hollywood, in the movies and so on, they imagine themselves in their chosen role. It could be you, for instance, playing the role of Macbeth or Romeo or someone else. So you imagine yourself in that role, playing the character. You imagine yourself becoming that character. So the imagination has a very, very important function. Without it, your society would most likely still be peeling fleas off each other's backs, so to speak. The building of your civilizations, where it is the ancient pyramids to some of the modern tallest skyscrapers in Dubai or United Arab Emirates or Kuala Lumpur or some other place in the world, New York, all requires the use of the imagination. The architects, the designers, all these forms of artistry rely upon being able to see that in the visual field of their mind. Some have even gone beyond that. There have been reports of scientists and others being able to function and design it in their minds to the point where if it didn't work in their mind, it would not work in physical reality. Once it worked in their mind, then they would construct it and it would work in exactly the way they imagined it. So utilizing the imagination for some people has a short lifespan because at a certain point in your young adulthood, 13, 14, 15 years of age, sometimes a little later, sometimes a little earlier, you might be told, oh, grow up, stop being a child, become an adult now. You're about to enter the world of adulthood. You need to become serious. You have to let go of the things of the child. And that is where the imagination meets its nemesis, a rational, logical, thinking self, as imposed by others. Does that make sense?
It does, and with the talk of the children, there's an interesting um, passage in John Cleese, the comedian from Monty Python, wrote a book.
Indeed.
It's the little book of creativity, and he talks about a study where they looked at the most successful architects of the designers of these buildings and these are skyscrapers and the ones who are at the top of their field and could think creatively and come up with new things. They had two characteristics. The one was being okay with uncertainty or not knowing something in the moment. And the second one was retaining the ability to play and to play in a childlike way. It was an absolute uh, requirement to operate on that level. And
Indeed.
yeah, so that's an interesting connection there. Those seem to be people who didn't lose that faculty of imagination
In
in
fact,
that
it
way.
may even go further than that. A large segment of the population may be convinced that, especially with science and scientists, they are really serious, logical, rational thinking beings and would never venture into the realm of the imagination, which is actually completely false. They use the imagination, they use their imagination sometimes for breakthrough insights into a formulation of a chemical compound or solving problems and even mysteries that may have perplexed them for decades. That is done in the use of the imagination. It becomes a laboratory of sorts, and you can put things together there, assemble certain equations, and you get that aha, eureka, bingo moment. So if you think the imagination is strictly for children, then you might have a tremendous challenge in your mind and on your hands, because you need to imagine yourself as not using the imagination, as being a rational, logical thinking being. So you have to imagine that, and you have to conform to the roles you give yourself in your imagination in that way. Wouldn't it be easier and less stressful to actually be who you think you should be, as opposed to be who you think other people want you to be? So there you have a kind of dilemma on your hands, but one that, for all intents and purposes, can actually bring you back to roots of some kind, back to your basic self, a self that is curious about the universe, about reality, about life, about being. That is where you will shine the brightest, in that particular zone where your curiosity doesn't kill you, but instead gives you life, long life. Why do people who retire and have not planned what to do with their retirements leave your planet so much earlier than those who actually had a certain plan and started traveling or exploring and finding hobbies and wonderful things to do with their time? So from our perspective, there is a direct correlation, because you have never been able to imagine yourself past that retirement age. Now you're stuck because you are there. With those who have planned, those who have pushed the boundaries and have imagined that after their retirement, they may travel, they may go here, they may do that, they may start new hobbies, they may even go back to school or university, learn new things, new skills. They have a higher rate of life expectancy because they do not see their retirement as the end of the road. They see it as an opportunity to open new doors, to discover new things about themselves, their abilities, their capacities. And that has a significant impact, not just in longevity, but in quality of life. The ancient philosophers, regardless of background, knew of this and spoke of this in very many ways. And you have the same dilemma today. So the challenge is, who are you going to be? What people or society tells you who you should be, or who you determine you can be? The effects, the repercussions, the impact is huge. And it does impact quality of life and longevity. if you have nothing to look forward to, if you have not been able to excite your imagination with tomorrow and the day after and the day after that, you might think this is the end of the road. And that kind of thinking leads to that kind of experience. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. And I'm wondering if, and perhaps this isn't the best wording, but can we as humans then get lost in our imagination? And maybe that goes a little bit back to this idea of wishful thinking, of imagining you have something or this building or this invention, and you're imagining it, but then never actually then take any action to move in that direction physically or to experience that. Is can that create its own set of problems, or could you explain that scenario as well?
Having an active, healthy, strong, vibrant, and virile imagination will sustain your quality of life. Being afraid of your imagination and anything related to it has the opposite effect. Does that answer your inquiry?
Yeah, that makes sense. That uh, continuing to imagine something kind of at the level of the mind and never taking any sort of action on it would be likely a consequence of fear that would block that movement.
Indeed. And fear is a great thief. It robs you of opportunities to not only explore life, but it robs you of the ability to be yourself. And the strangest thing about the situation is that fear is a self-produced thing, which is something you set up. And you might say, oh, no, well, these actions over there or these people over there. No, you chose to take their narratives into yourself and act based upon those false narratives. The use of the imagination can also be extremely beneficial, even for your physical health and your longevity. You can utilize it to actually improve your physical sense of self. And you are familiar as a doctor with the telomeres, correct? The telomeres.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mm. Those are those little, mm, almost shoelace type things at the end of your chromosomes, the DNA receptors, correct?
Uh, yeah. They kind of shorten with age, and
Indeed,
as
as
they
they divide and replicate, they seem to get shorter because you imagine yourself getting weaker with older age. So the system, your physical system, has to reflect what you think about yourself, your body, and your life situation. If the entire social narrative or script about growing older was flipped on its head overnight, you would see different things reflected in the DNA. You would start seeing that people may grow older, but the telomeres do not shorten as they replicate. They do not lose their potency. The person may not lose their potency. They still remain sharp, active. There are, we believe you call them blue zones throughout the world, where there is aging population, yet the inhabitants have a healthy diet, a healthy frame of mind, are active, They do not let the fact that they might be 70, 80, or more years old slow them down to the degree you see in North American society. There are people in North America who are 40, 50 years old, and yet they're already acting as if they have one foot in the grave. So these inhabitants of the blue zones can teach humanity a great amount of secrets, so to speak. And were their particular DNA examined, you would be surprised that their DNA is healthier than some people who are much younger than they are in other parts of the world. It is not just about the diet. It is about the frame of mind, about the attitudes, about their quality of life. They don't let growing older slow them down. So a great many things can be learned from those people. And again, we want to say it's not just about the diet. These are all factors, but the main major factor is their attitude. They have intricate, supportive social structures, social systems, great friendships. They have social activities that bond them as friends. They support each other. And yes, they eat great food, but they also see themselves in a great way. Thus, seeing themselves in a great way involves the imagination. They see themselves being healthy, productive members of their culture, even into old age. Again, the imagination has a great amount to do with their situation.
Yeah, yeah,
A,
that's
a
there's
culture or civilization that imagines itself on the brink of disaster or fall will go there. Now, please continue.
I was just gonna say there's the Blue Zone documentary on Netflix, and you are correct. If any of the viewers watch that, um, food was just one factor. They interview all the different people from these zones, and yeah, it's very much in line with what you were saying. Uh, One, the older residents valued themselves and their place in their society, as well as the other people there. And there was a mindset. I don't remember all of the details, but they even categorized many of the characteristics of that particular mindset as well. So it's
Indeed.
it's
You
really
would also
interesting.
find in those particular groupings another important attitude, and that is that the younger generation do not consider the older generation as being worth little more than just to throw them in a garbage can, as in Western society. Put your parents in an old age home, visit them once a year, insist that you must inherit all their funds, otherwise, they're dead. So they treat them as if they are already dead. And what happens to the personality? They eventually comply. So that alone should give you insights into the nature and the importance of cultivating an appropriate mindset. And that may even become a point of discussion in Mindset Reset, which begins on the 29th. Now, we will return Joseph to you, and we thank you for your consideration, as well as the consideration of everyone who watches these videos.
All right. Yes, thank you, Kris. And likely we'll be releasing this video after the start of that workshop, but you head over to channelingkris.com in the description below. And you could either, get in a little bit late, work something out, or there's running every 8 to 10 weeks. So check it out, and you could get a little bit deeper into this topic. So, all right,
Available on our website as a download.
yeah, yeah,
I
no, that's
have I have to add some of the more recent ones too.
well, that's a good option too. Yeah, but yeah, so check it out, and thanks for being with us. Bye bye.